A helpful hint for any listeners that may have kiddos around, these are conversations between adults intended for adults. There is the potential for some adult subject matter or adult language. Hello, this is Danielle Ireland, and you are listening to Don't Cut Your Own Bangs. Today's guest is Tanorria Askew. If you've ever thought to yourself, I want to know more about topics that make me a little uncomfortable, but I don't want to sound stupid, or I don't want to sound ignorant, or I don't want to make a fool of myself, this is definitely an episode you're going to want to listen to. Tanorria and her friend Amanda have just started a group called This Conversation Might Get Awkward. It's essentially a conversation and a dialogue between Tanorria and her friend about race. Tanorria has a really unique gift in being direct enough and authentic enough, I think, to challenge bias and maybe unconscious bias, and also a presence that's so warm and inviting and authentic that you feel safe to let your guard down and get a little messy and make mistakes. And what also is really exciting to talk to her about this is she also takes that same adventurous spirit, desire to learn more, and a desire to really connect with experience at the dinner table. So her mission is to basically invite you to come have a seat at her table, not only enjoy her food and her culinary expertise as a private chef, but to sit at the table, relax, settle in, let your guard down, and open yourself up to a conversation that just might change the way you see the world. I'm so excited for you to join us on this episode. And I want to introduce the episode with a quote from her that I think is really going to give you just a taste of what you're in store for. There is something uniquely impactful when you listen without presumption and without the urge to debate, and understand that it may be something that you yourself have not experienced. That's a quote from Tanorria, and that's pretty much all you need to know about this episode. And also prepare to laugh because it's going to be really funny. But I hope that you are ready to sit back, relax, and enjoy Tanorria Askew. It worked. It totally worked. Tanorria Askew. Askew. Did I just get it wrong again? It's okay.
It really does mean twisted, but...
Tanorria Askew.
Just like ask you a question.
Did I say it right that time?
Yes.
All right, Tanorria Askew. It's fine. Well, and I'm going to leave that in. Okay. So, well, thank you for being here, Tanorria.
Thank you.
I'm so glad you're here. So this is the third time we've interacted. The first was at the Hive.
Yes.
We were speaking on a panel together for the Hive Indie, which it's a, how would you describe it? It's not exactly a networking event. It's more of like a connecting event.
Yeah. It's women of all walks of life get together and share a meal.
And get to know each other. And then they usually either have like a speaker, not really even a keynote. It's like a short 5-minute story.
Yeah.
And then this particular event, they had a panel.
Right.
And where they asked us all sorts of different questions as it related to their mission, which was really fun. And I loved your answers to all the questions. And I remember during that, I kept making mental notes. Ask her about the podcast. She would be amazing on the podcast. Don't forget. And then I asked you, but then it's sort of like life happens, you know?
Yeah.
But then as fate would have it, I get to see you surprisingly again, guest moderating a panel with Candace. And you two did an incredible job.
Oh, thank you.
Really
She's
incredible.
the yin to my yang. She is.
It was, I mean, you two do seem to kind of, you had a good back and forth, a really good rapport.
Yeah.
But it was, you know, a panel discussing like food scarcity, food deserts, race, poverty, just a big conversation around like food in the Indianapolis community. And, and it was a really great way to spend a Sunday afternoon.
Good.
Yeah.
I love that.
And I was genuinely surprised when my husband, because he actually volunteers with the Patitude Foundation. And I was really surprised when he said, there's this event, it's like women, like diversity, food, and it's on a Sunday. And I was like, no one's going to go. like no one, well, because I was like, not because of the topic or not because of the content, but I was like, it's a Sunday at 4.
Yeah.
Like no one's going to do that.
Yeah.
And I was blown away.
We've been blown away with the turnout every single time.
Yeah.
Thursday evenings, Sunday evenings, we've just thought, okay, this isn't a Friday night or a Saturday night. People aren't going to show up, but people have showed up. We had one at another location where people were standing. People want to talk about this stuff.
Well, and I truly believe that when you're not living paycheck to paycheck, when you are getting regular meals, beyond that, the most valuable resource you have is your time.
Absolutely.
And for people, how people choose to spend their time when there are so many options, so many distractions. Everybody's busy. There's kind of like busyness is now like a new currency. Like, how busy are you? And am I busier than you? But for people to take 2 hours to sit and have a conversation that is potentially uncomfortable, that makes them think about things in a new way, that challenges bias. It was just really impactful. It struck me.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
I really believe that people make time for the stuff that matters. And this stuff really does matter. And I think the draw specifically to that topic about food insecurity is that it's affecting our kids and our youth. And that's when everybody's eyes open. You can't avoid that. You can't pretend like out of sight, out of mind, because it's affecting children.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. Oh, that's so true. Kind of like letting that wash over me for a second.
Yeah.
I want to talk about some of the topics you touched on the panel, but I also, before I get too deep into that, I want to first kind of pull back and introduce you.
Yeah.
Like really, and let you kind of share with our listeners a little bit about who you are and your background so that they can get familiar with you, because there's so many things I want us to talk about. But I definitely want to make sure that by the end of this episode, people are connecting with you, following you, connecting with your content, because it's good. It's delicious, I'll say.
Well, thank you.
Oh, you're welcome. So I love that on tanorriastable.com, your website, that's like, come have a seat at my table.
Yes.
And there's something about the way that you have this passion to pull conversation into food and to really create that experience. But it seems like inclusivity is key ingredient to this mashup that you're in, this movement that you're sort of growing and developing and becoming a part of. So can you tell me a little bit more about what that means to you, the come have a seat at my table?
Yeah. So I grew up where my home, with my parents, and also I saw it with my grandparents, our home was the place that everyone came to eat. We were always having gatherings. My family, there's 4 of us, my mom, my dad, and my older brother. We moved from Tennessee to Kokomo, Indiana when I was 3 years old, and we had no family here. We only knew someone that my dad knew because he worked for GM, and that was our kind of connection point. So we just started hosting and having people over, and I was like, oh, this is how you make friends. Okay. And even when we moved to Indianapolis and we found a church and we made friends at school, it was always come over for dinner. Or if we weren't coming over, having people over for dinner, we were going out to dinner on Sunday after church. And so I just really picked up on this connection of how sitting around a table, having a conversation, food breaks that tension.
Yeah.
There's the discomfort because maybe I don't know the person. Maybe I have to have a difficult conversation. Maybe I just have to have a conversation about a lot of things. And the table is, okay, let's get organized. Let's get situated. Let's put some food in front of me. And that's something we're sharing commonly.
As you were describing that, what was coming up for me, because my background prior to working as a therapist is I was a theater student and I worked as a commercial actor. And the way you were saying, like the sort of establishing the context of sitting around the table, getting the food set, everybody's places are set. It kind of makes me think about story development, and you're establishing the world. And because you feel safe to enter a story when you understand the world you're in. And it sounds like the food and the table, the way you're describing it, it gives everyone a context to participate. And then the food allows them to settle in, and then the sharing happens.
Right.
Wow.
Right. It's a wall comes down because eating with someone else is an intimate experience.
Yeah, it is.
Whether it's a stranger you're having coffee with for the first time, or it's your spouse that you sit down and have dinner with every night, it's still intimate because they have to watch you chew and watch you get food on your mouth or spill a little something. And so there's a small sense of vulnerability. And so even if you're having a difficult conversation about race, about injustice, about poverty, or whatever the case may be, there is a sense of someone's more superior in this conversation. Maybe they're the expert in the room.
But it's hard to be superior with like eating baby back ribs, right? It's hard to be, it's like,
I have no shame. Just give me the bone. Just going in.
It's like, how powerful do you feel with barbecue sauce over your face?
Right. And so that kind of, it negates that superiority a little bit and says, we have a little bit of a level playing field. You brought me to the table because you have something you want to say, but you're making me comfortable at the table because we're sharing in something intimately.
Oh, that just gave me chills. I've never thought about food that way.
Yeah.
And I love food, but I've never thought about food that way. And that is really powerful, because there was, as I was thinking about like preparing for this episode and thinking about just some of the things that I really took with me from that panel that you and Candace led. Mm-hmm. And I've been thinking about this a lot ever since, that if you're only talking to people who look and think and believe the way you do, you're not really having a conversation. You're just talking into a mirror. Yeah. And so it's easy to think, and I can relate this to kind of like my mental health background, but it's easy to think that when you're having this internal dialogue all the time, that means it's being discussed. Or if it's on your mind, therefore it's present in the conversation, but until it's actually spoken aloud, and until and I think you do a great job of encouraging this, I think in a direct way, but also an inviting way of like, let yourself be uncomfortable. Yes. Let yourself get out of comfort a little bit and ask the thing that you probably need to ask, or say the stupid thing, get the sauce on your face, let it spit out of your mouth. And I love that the food is actually like a metaphor for growth.
Yeah, it really is. A lot of people just eat to live. I live to eat because it's my job and I love it. But I have spent time just recognizing what food can do for people. It is not just nourishing to the body, but it is nourishing to the mind and to the soul and to the relationship. And so, yeah, I spent 8 years standing in front of adults telling them what to do as a corporate trainer. And a lot of these people were coming in awkward and uncomfortable because it was their first day on the job. And I recognized quickly that within the first hour, people are going to change their mind 7 times on whether or not that job is right for them. Wow. And part of them making that decision is based on their environment and the culture. And I just wanted people to feel welcome. And I wanted to cut the elephant in the room at the very, very beginning. And so we talked about silly things. We talked about awkward things just in our introductions with each other. And I learned that people got really comfortable with me really quickly, and that makes them more engaged in their learning. Yeah. And so I take that, and then I take the fact that I can cook, and I put that together and say, let's have a conversation. Yes. Let's build on that. So just a little bit of I'll call it like your highlight reel. So you were on MasterChef season 7. We need to talk about that. You're regularly featured on the food segment for WTHR. You are definitely a presence in not only the local indie community, but also just the food community as a whole. Like, you have a presence there. And then you also there's a couple of, it seems like, other communities that you support and or co-created. Black Girls Eat. Wait, Black Girls Eating. Yes, Black Girls Eating. I want to make sure, and I'll put all the handles in the show notes, but I want to make sure I'm saying it correctly. So Black Girls Eating and Indie Women in Food. Yes. Is there anything else that I'm missing? Newly, this conversation might get awkward. Yes. Yes. And I'm so pumped about that. I want to hear more about your journey as it's evolved from the beginning of, I'm a corporate trainer and I have this gift with food. And I also have this gift with helping people feel comfortable and helping them learn and grow. But that was the beginning. But what was the next step? Yeah. Oh, my word. So I worked at a local credit union for 15 years, 7 of it on the sales side, 8 of it human resources, training, development, diversity, and inclusion. Did you enjoy working for a credit union? I did for a big chunk of my job. Okay. Probably the last 4 to 5 years, I just was not challenged. I knew there was nowhere to go within my role. I was really trying to get them to create a specific role in diversity for me. I knew that wasn't going to happen after trying so long. And I got to the point where on Sunday nights I was crying because I didn't want to go to work on Monday. And I'm not a crier. So I knew, I was like, okay, we're going to have to do something about this. And I just kept saying, I just want to quit my job, cash in my 401k, and like be a food missionary. That doesn't really exist. And I'm glad I didn't do that. Although you can make up whatever title you want. Right. Like Brene Brown, I love that she was like, I am a researcher storyteller. Yes. It's not a job title.
but she made it. So maybe you are a food missionary.
Maybe I am. Maybe I am.
You're a food missionary with a mission.
Ooh, I like that.
We'll build on it. Before the end, we'll have it.
I like that.
Yeah.
So I knew that it was just not, I kept saying, I don't want to retire doing this. And it's rare for someone who starts a job at 20 years old to stay for 15 years. And so I knew that, but I just started cooking for friends when I got my first apartment. I started cooking for friends and like, you should do this like as a job. And I was like, no, it's just fun. But I picked up on that's the community. People were coming over. I was able to entertain. And I thought, okay, maybe I'll go to culinary school. So I went for 1 semester. I did the online stuff, nothing in the kitchen. But my job had me traveling so much that I couldn't keep up. I couldn't do the kitchen classes. So I have 1 semester of culinary training under my belt.
Okay.
Everything else I learned from my mom, my grandma, and the Food Network. I come from the Culinary Institute of my parents and grandparents.
I love it. And the Food Network.
Yeah.
Was that part of your audition to get on MasterChef?
No, because they're like competing networks.
Oh.
I didn't even talk about it that much. But
that's smart. I didn't know that.
Really, like I dedicate all of my knowledge to Rachel Ray because I love her.
Love Rachel
so
Ray.
Much.
She has no formal training either,
right?
which I think what makes her so relatable.
Yes.
Yeah.
So yeah, I tried the culinary school thing, didn't work out. And I went through a really weird time. I call it weird because that's just the best way to describe it. Mm-hmm. I went through a really weird time in my life where I was in an abusive marriage. Mm-hmm. I ended my marriage and I was like, okay, what am I going to do now? Because my therapist at the time, she's like, honey, you're in survival mode. And now you're out of that and you don't know what to do with yourself because the sky's the limit. And my friends were pushing me to audition for MasterChef. I'm like, you guys are crazy. Plus, I didn't want Gordon Ramsay to yell at me. So I was like, I want to do like Chopped, not MasterChef, because I don't want to get yelled at. And so I auditioned for MasterChef. And Danielle, I cannot begin to describe like going to the audition, the application process, the 3-month-long audition process thereafter the face-to-face audition.
3 months?
3 months.
Oh my God.
Of like, mail this in, sign this, video that, do this, take a psych eval. 502 question psych eval. It was intense.
Are they basically wanting to know, like, will he traumatize you if he screams at you?
I think it's because season 1 or 2, they had someone commit suicide. And so they're like, we're covering all of our bases. And they're looking for characters.
Of course.
And so they want to make sure these characters...
They need you just unstable enough to be good TV, but not so stable that you hurt yourself. Right. Wow. That's a sweet spot.
Exactly.
Okay.
Yeah. So this long process, there was just something about it where I was like, I got this.
Yeah.
Like the only time that I felt like, okay, maybe things aren't in my favor was they went more than 2 weeks communicating with me. Because it was pretty consistent about every 2 weeks. But there was a little lag at one point. And then the next thing you know, I got an email that says you're going to California. So even getting ready to go to California was really stressful because you're figuring out, how do I pause 9 weeks of my life? Figuring that out, managing that, dealing with work, and then getting out there, getting on the plane, all of that. I just knew I got this. And then I get out there and I was like, I just had it in my head. I'm not here to make friends. I'm not here to do all the crazy things. I'm here to win. Mm-hmm. And so I was just in it to win it focused. I have a little regret about that because the walls were up and everybody knew it. There's like 2 or 3 people that got past those walls. Mm-hmm. For the most part, they're like, Tanorria is intense. But I'm also glad about that intensity because after 16-hour days of filming, we go back to our hotel room, everyone's partying, hanging out. And I was like, I'm going to my room to study and to decompress. Mm-hmm. Because I think if I hadn't done that every night, I would have been a ball of anxiety. But I just had so much confidence up until the very last battle. Mm-hmm. There's a couple battles that I was like, ooh, what the heck am I doing? But the very last battle, I knew it was my time to go. I knew and I felt okay with it. I had peace with it. And then I watched it when everyone else watched it. And I was like, holy crap, I got robbed. Oh. I should have won. Oh. But there's a huge part of me that absolutely I wish I'd won. And I'm grateful that they continued to consider me a fan favorite and use me for other things. But then there's another part of me that's like, I'm glad I didn't win because I get to create my own brand and develop my own space and not just talk about food, but talk about the other things that I'm super passionate about with diversity and inclusion. And so, yeah, there's bright sides to all of it.
Yeah. I'm interested in when you were saying you're like, for every step of the way, you knew you got this. I've maybe only had 1 or 2 times in my life where I had that level of certainty through the entire process. Because more often, I think what I experience is I'll get a glimmer of an idea, like I'll get like a little whisper of an idea. And then I quickly go from, wow, this could really be something to, oh my God, holy shit, how am I going to do this?
Yeah.
And it's sort of like that up and down. But do you often have that clarity? Is that just part of your makeup?
No,
okay.
Not at all.
So this was unique to this situation.
Yeah, it really was.
Yeah.
Especially in my self-employment entrepreneurial life now, I question myself daily on what the heck am I doing? Why did I do this? Do I need to go get a big girl job? But there has been every single time I consider getting a corporate job, I literally get sick to my stomach.
Yes.
I know I'm not meant to do that. But all of the ideas that I come up with to grow my business and to develop my brand, every single one of them, I doubt myself. Comparison is the worst thing ever.
Yeah.
So I struggle with that daily. So no, MasterChef was clear, and also quitting my job was clear.
Was that the vehicle that helped you leave your job?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I got back from MasterChef, and when I went out there, I was like, okay, all or nothing. Came back, and you can't sit behind a desk after you do that. You just can't.
Yeah.
And I even remember one time I was in the test kitchen of MasterChef. This is not where the cameras are. And I stood there and I thought, oh my gosh, I'm standing here at like 2:00 in the afternoon cutting a bell pepper.
And this is what you're meant to do.
Yes.
And this is it.
There were just all of these nuggets that were so clear to me throughout that journey. And so when I got back, really just figuring out when I was going to quit. And I was so loyal to my boss. Like, I still miss her to this day. And it's been 4 years. That was the hard part, is figuring out when I was going to quit. But I just knew.
Yeah.
It was very clear. Like, I was worried about how am I going to make ends meet? How am I going to build my business? And how am I going to do? And it was just all of these different things were very clear.
I love that you talked about your relationship with your boss at your old job, because I think that whether I'm working with like a couple in relationships or even thinking about myself and starting my own practice, like when I'm working with couples, sometimes there's a type of situation where someone or both people are not happy, but they're like, well, there wasn't infidelity, there wasn't abuse, I'm still not happy. And I think what's so hard is like, sometimes it's almost like we feel like we have to wait until there's a catastrophe or we're truly in severe pain or rock bottom before we're allowed to have permission to make a change. Because really the opposite is like either pain's going to be the catalyst or moving towards your happiness is going to be the catalyst. And it's one of the hardest, most challenging, and yet bravest things you can ever do. Because I really relate to that, because where I left, I didn't leave because it wasn't a good place.
Right.
I didn't leave because they weren't great people. They are great people. They are. And it was a wonderful place to live, like, or to work. But I knew, like, that nugget, every time I get a taste of freedom, of setting my own terms, setting my own pace, it's like that lights me on fire. And I just need to follow that, but it's hard.
It is.
And I want to go back to, because you are involved in so many things. I'm very interested in how you decide to say yes. And like, what is that thing? Because your hand is in so many different things. Like, how do you know this is what I want to say yes to? This is not something that suits me.
I have always been the type of person who makes decisions fairly easily. My mom has said that about me, even as a little girl. And I remember my mom, we were actually furniture shopping for my first apartment. And I was struggling with one couch at one store versus a couch at another store. And there was a slight cost difference. And she knows I have caviar taste, sometimes on a bologna budget. And she was like, honey, you're going to regret it if you don't get what you want.
Yes.
As compared to settling. And so I kind of use that with a lot of decision making. Is it something that I absolutely want? Is it something I'm going to be happy with moving forward? Does it make me feel like I'm doing something good or it's advancing my career? It doesn't have to be both.
Right.
Is it helping other people? And is it something that I don't have to reduce myself for?
Oh.
So partnering with other people. If I'm sitting across a room or even reading an email from someone who maybe wants to partner, and I just get this sense of, you're not going to make me feel like I'm good enough.
I need to I have the head explosion emoji face. Like, what? That is huge. I'm getting waves through my body that I don't have to reduce myself.
Yeah.
That is so critical. And it makes me think to go back to comparison is the thief of happiness.
Mm-hmm.
I know I've heard Brene Brown say that. I don't know if that's originally her quote, but I know I've heard her say that the comparison is the thief of happiness. And I think what makes comparison alone painful, because sometimes comparison is a way to gauge oh, I'm okay.
Yeah.
That's what also makes the Me Too movement. And right there,
right.
It's oh, I'm not alone.
Mm-hmm.
But comparison, when it's the thief of happiness, it's when we feel reduced.
Exactly.
And when we feel small.
When I feel less than.
Yes.
Yeah.
And particularly, I think with social media, I don't know if it's a chicken or egg, probably both. If I'm not feeling good about me and then I see a blogger who has 10,000 hits on a post and she's doing a headstand and some aloe yoga, I'm oh, well, I'm fucking failing at life.
Absolutely.
I'm failing. But that was what I brought into that moment. Now, I also, though, can sometimes sense, and I don't know exactly how to describe it. Maybe you can help me with this, but where I'll see someone share or I'll see someone speak or present, and I can tell that this is about you. This isn't actually about your message. This isn't actually about who you're speaking for. It's not really about your content. This is about you, and I don't feel included. And that is not necessarily about me. And I don't know exactly how to describe that, but it seems like you can relate.
Absolutely. Yeah. I was actually talking to a friend of mine who is an incredibly successful food blogger, cookbook author. And she was like, I just hate the word blogger. I hate the word influencer.
It's reductive.
Yeah.
First, blogger is reductive because it's oh, you have a little blog,
right,
and you write little things, but no, that's virtually where a lot of online content. That's a lot of how online content shared.
It's what pops up when you Google things now.
Yeah.
But the point that she brought was, she's like, when you say that, just kind of how you said it's reductive. When you say I'm a blogger, people immediately assume, okay, you want something for free, or you think you're the expert when you really have no background. So you're right. I see a lot of bloggers on social media, and I've unfollowed a lot because it's just not a productive space for me to see what they're doing. But yeah, when someone approaches me and says, hey, I want to partner, or will you be involved with this? And I know that I'm going to get in that situation and my guard is going to go up. I'm not going to be fully myself. I'm not going to say yes.
I think that's a really great way to gauge that.
Yeah.
So I want to now jump to this convo might get awkward, or this conversation might get awkward. And so I love this message that tied in with that. You made a post recently where you said that there's something uniquely impactful when you listen without presumption, without the urge to debate, and understanding that it is possible that this is something you haven't experienced. And I think that the lack of experience, that one really strikes home because you don't know what you don't know.
Right.
And so I'm curious how you're if you're open to sharing, what are one of the ways you've either experienced or you're wanting to tackle this new conversation, this dialogue that you're wanting to open up? How can you take something that someone truly maybe has never experienced in their lifetime and help them relate or connect? I don't know if empathy would be the way into that, maybe leaning into compassion, but where's that connective thread, do you think?
I get this question a lot. I get the question, what can I do to learn more? And I think the best thing you can do is not expect someone, because I'm talking specifically about racism and racial injustice. What can I do to learn more? The first thing to do is not expect one person, not to find that one person who doesn't look like you and make them your token friend to answer all of your questions.
Yes. That was discussed on the panel that you had.
Yes. The same way that I can Google a recipe, I can Google podcasts to listen to. I can Google books to read. I can see what that one friend, see who they're following on social media and who they're tagging and who they're sharing and follow those accounts. Mm-hmm. Even if you don't like the content, even if the content makes you uncomfortable, one, why does it make you uncomfortable?
Yes.
Two, give it 30 days. If after 30 days you haven't learned something or you're like, I just cannot with this content, unfollow it. You don't have to tell anybody you did. Mm-hmm. It's okay. But yeah, I think the connection is, I actually said this to someone yesterday. There is a huge difference between I don't know what I don't know, and I don't know because I don't want to know. And we know that there's a lot going on, and we know that racial injustice exists. But what is so easy for us to do is to, out of sight, out of mind, it doesn't affect me. Actually, it does in so many indirect ways, whether that's affecting you on the job, affecting your kids in school, affecting your relationships and the people around you. And so the first thing we have to do is recognize there are things we don't know, but are we avoiding things? And that's why we don't know.
Yeah.
That's a huge eye-opening thing. It's an aha moment for a lot of people. And then just educate. Mm-hmm. I actually told my assistant I was going to write a blog post that says, I fight for racial injustice and 90% of my friends are white, because most of my friends are not people of color. And so I have this conversation all the time because that's the conversation I'm having with my friends. But I much rather my friend come to me after reading a book or listening to a podcast or reading my blog post and learning and giving me educated questions,
yes,
than walking in blindly like, so does this happen for all Black people? I'm like, wait a minute, slow down.
Well, because that's not really a question.
Right.
If you think about it, like that isn't a question. Mm-hmm. And it's almost like you're almost wanting to confirm your own bias.
Yes.
Like then, and I think that maybe that leads into like, kind of connects back to what we were talking about in terms of like feeling reduced.
Yes.
Or feeling like that's a reductive question, or even potentially a leading question.
Yes.
Because I'm setting it up in a way where I want you to confirm what I already believe or what I hope is true. And I don't want you to challenge me.
Right.
Versus getting vulnerable. Like, ooh, I just learned something new. This is kind of rumbling inside me and I don't know how to make sense of it. Can you offer some guidance?
Yes.
Those are two like polar opposite
huge
questions.
Difference.
Yeah.
Huge difference.
Yeah.
And I feel like I have made myself a safe place to ask questions, but I have had to set boundaries on letting people approach with educated questions.
Yeah.
At one point, I was hosting what I call unity tables, and it was basically, the draw was I cook a meal, but then we sit down and I actually facilitate a conversation about racial injustice and all the things going on in the world. It was really intimate. It was usually no more than 10 women, all different walks of life, faith backgrounds, racial backgrounds, all diverse. And I would walk away from these so like on fire. And 2 days later, I would think, well, what is anybody doing about it? Like, did anyone leave with action items? And I felt like I was giving action items, but really what was happening was people just wanted to come back to the table to listen to me again. And I'm like, that's great, but what are you doing between now and next quarter? And so that's when I learned that I can't be the person to answer all the things all the time.
Well, that actually makes me think a lot about the relationship I have with my clients, because the goal is ultimately for them not to need me as much.
Yes.
I mean, and that's different than like coming in every once in a while for a tune-up or when you really are struggling with something. But as long as people are dependent on you and your messaging, they're not actually equipped with the tools that they need to go out into the world and experience it in a new way.
Exactly.
Something I remember, it's like one of the things they teach you in school, or they try to help, they're like, you can't provide all the answers. You're not responsible for providing all the answers. That's not what your role is. And you hear it and you're like, yeah, sure. Mm-hmm. And then you're sitting in front of someone who's in pain. You're like, I've got all the answers.
Yeah.
I've got everything you need. You just let me tell you. And one of the hardest things for me to reorient in my brain was to remind myself of what my role is and what my responsibilities are.
Yeah.
And also reminding myself too, because I do my own work. I see my own therapist, shout out to Brian, that people ultimately want to be self-determined And part of being self-actualized is being able to know that like I'm creating my own solutions and I'm making my own decisions. It's like when we're struggling, what we want is someone to just hand us a how-to list, just tell me what to do and tell me how to do it. But the truth is that's not really what people want.
Right.
Not really. And that's usually why when people make New Year's resolutions or they make these major proclamations, they don't follow through because it probably wasn't really originally their idea.
Yeah.
And so I wonder if like maybe your role is facilitating the conversation, not necessarily helping them create the plan to move forward, or maybe even just saying like, what is your plan now?
Yeah. And that's kind of what this conversation Might Get Awkward is doing.
Yeah.
It's a one-time discussion. And I say that if you are looking to learn more about racial injustice and learn more just about people who don't look like you, it's a journey. It's not an event. But this event is a great start or a great continuation on that journey. And so we have a conversation to basically get over that starting awkward stuff. Manda is a white woman and she fosters children of color. And I am a Black woman who has my own experiences, just like the quote that you mentioned that I said, I don't want someone to sit across the table from me and combat my own personal experiences. I am the expert of my own experiences. And so for someone to sit across the table from me and tell me something is or is not racism, and they've never actually experienced racism, like, wait a minute, what's happening here? And so Manda and I are breaking that awkwardness. And then we're letting you walk away with resources and empowerment to do the work.
I love that.
Yeah.
Love that.
Yeah.
So your first one's coming up, but are you planning to do these quarterly?
Our first one actually just got rescheduled yesterday.
Oh, right. Because of Corona.
Because of all the things.
Yep.
And so the first one is going to be in Chicago on May 15th.
Okay.
And then we are hosting one here in Indy sometime in the fall, September or October.
Okay. Well, that's excellent. This will definitely be out before that. So I'll make sure to put all the dates and all the links so that people can find it after. I'm sure after this episode, they'll want to.
Yeah. And it's meant to be fun. It's a tough conversation, but if you've ever sat anywhere with me being on a stage, I'm going to make you laugh.
I will say that is something like when we are talking about important things and have maybe even like heavy things, but that is, I think, a gift that you have in my experience in seeing you speak twice or speaking next to you and watching you speak twice is that you offer like a levity to experience. And I think that's needed.
It is.
There is something about when something is really true and it hits you, you have a physical response. And what I see is that like, it's usually either closer to tears or closer to laughing. And sometimes it's a little bit of both.
Yeah.
Yeah. So sometimes we just need to not take ourselves so seriously.
Absolutely.
So knowing what you know now, this journey that's taken you to here. So you have been a free agent, for 4 years?
Yes.
And then your journey to bringing food into your training experience was about 7 years ago?
Yeah. I started Unity Tables a little bit before I became self-employed.
So knowing what you know now and being on this end of that experience, what do you think the Tanorria from 7 years ago or 6 years ago would need to hear that you now know?
I think the biggest thing when I think back on what I was doing 7 years ago, that was 2013. I was in the height of leaving my marriage and figuring out what am I doing with my life? And I think the biggest thing that I learned and I still try to apply to everything I do now is stop worrying about what everyone else is thinking.
Yeah.
That was the main reason why it took me so long to get a divorce.
Yep.
To leave an abusive marriage was because I was really concerned about what everyone was going to think, what my faith community was going to think, what my friends in my wedding, like, oh my gosh, they spent all this money and now it's over and not worrying about that because it is just a blip in all the things. And like, so many people in my life who were a part of my life then and now, it's almost like that didn't even exist. It's like it's a blur on an old map. And so being consumed with that crippled me. And so even now, when it comes to dealing with my business and dealing with having to make certain decisions and even I just recently left a faith community that I was a part of for a long time. And so being so consumed about what people thought about that, or being consumed about how I talk about my business on social media. People follow me for a reason. They follow me because they trust what I have to say, whether it's about food or it's about social justice or whatever. They trust me for a reason. And I need to focus my energy on those people and that audience. I need to focus my energy on my friends and family who are going to sit down and have a conversation with me about why I'm making the decisions. Help me understand, what can I do to support? Instead of being so consumed with one or two people.
Yes.
It's only one or two people.
I was just going to say,
it's not everybody.
Someone had encourage me to do an exercise, like whenever we use like superlatives, like everybody, nobody, always, they, that elusive they.
Yes.
Get real specific, and who are they?
Yes.
And it's two people.
It's two people, and it's two people that really don't matter.
No. What is it? Like the people that matter don't mind, and the people that mind don't matter?
Yes.
Yes. It's just, it's always two people.
Yeah.
Ugh.
One or two people who are not doing anything to support your business, are not paying your bills, so why do you care? Are not encouraging you and empowering you as an individual. So why are you so consumed with those one or two people? And why are those one or two people literally crippling you?
Well, because one, I mean, this shouldn't be what ideally, like, you have to push through anyway, but it's hard and it hurts because rejection is hard. Yeah. And it is for most of us. I think that most of us, with the exception of like the 0.001% that have oppositional defiant disorder or antisocial personality disorder, which is basically like anyway, too much of a therapy rabbit hole, but
I love it. I love it.
With the exception of those people in true narcissism, everybody else has empathy. And when you have the capacity for empathy, you then feel the rejection. Right. You feel the hurt. Yeah. And that feels like an emotional, spiritual death. Yeah. It really does.
And I had to like learn that it's okay to grieve losses. Yes. And I had to accept the fact, especially as a Black woman, I have been conditioned to believe that my pain is not as significant as others. I am not allowed to show my pain or my emotion because that's a sign of weakness. And so the loss of a friendship is traumatic.
It is.
A shift in your family dynamic is traumatic.
It is.
Being able to grieve those things and process those things and say those things out loud to safe people is something that I am just really pushing myself to do because it really is helpful.
It is traumatic. And it's also the bravest thing any of us can ever do, to step out on a limb and to step out and do this thing, risking that rejection.
Yes.
But also bravery doesn't exist without vulnerability. And that is an incredibly vulnerable thing. And it just seems like you and Candace both, I do feel like you do have this unique ability to create. I mean, even in like your story and all the different steps and nuggets that you followed along the way, you do have this unique ability, I think, to help people feel safe and secure, to be imperfect, that's a superpower.
Thank you.
That is a superpower.
I love that. Yes.
It is. It is 100%.
Yeah. I read this in someone's office years ago, and I've kind of turned it into my own thing. I think what they said was, if you want to be anybody, be yourself. And so I say now that it is absolutely exhausting being myself. So why would I want to waste any energy on being someone else? And myself is a hot mess, and I'm okay with that. I don't want to be perfect because that's a lot of work.
It's also boring.
Yes.
It's boring. It is.
Yeah.
It's boring. It's uninteresting. And it's also, it feeds so many toxic beliefs because it's impossible.
Yes.
It is impossible.
Yes.
So I want to talk to you a little bit about how you define delicious memories, because that's some of the language that you use on your website.
Yeah.
And what does a delicious memory mean to you?
It means a lot of things, but where that came from and how I guess use that as a tagline sometimes is, one of my jobs is I'm a personal chef. That's a part of Tanorria's Table. And so I get the honor of going into people's homes. Basically, I say I bring the restaurant to you. And so I get the honor of going into people's homes and When people are in their own space, their safest space with their people, and they are having that meal and being vulnerable, and usually it's a celebration of some sort, I get to watch them create memories. And they usually remember what I make, but honestly, that almost doesn't matter. It's the laughter that they're having, the conversations that they're having, how their inhibitions were down and they were able to just be loose and free because they're in their safest element. I get to do that. I get to help people do that. And that is like one of the most humbling things, that people trust me. Because I get strangers who ask me to do dinner parties. There's a lot of people I don't know, or I only know them or have a relationship with them in certain respects, like from they've seen me on TV, or I only know them from an event or something like that. And you're welcoming me into your home. You're trusting me to feed you. It just blows my mind constantly that people trust me to feed them. It really does.
Yeah.
And so that's where Delicious Memories kind of started. But more so for me personally, there are certain meals that I have had that I still think about to this day. And I really strive to be someone who does that for people, whether it's a dinner party or just a bite of something. When people approach me and say, that reminded me of my grandmother, like, I'm done. Just call it quits. I don't need to cook anything else. I actually had one lady, she was actually an elderly woman who had just lost a really close friend. And I made strawberry shortcake with cream cheese biscuits. And she approached me at this dinner party and said, my friend just passed away, and that strawberry shortcake was just like her mom's. I'm like, wait, what? That's not even possible.
Oh my God.
That's something I'm never going to forget. That's a memory for me that I'm never going to forget. And I created that for people. A lot of what I cook has to do with my grandmother, who's not with me anymore. And my gosh, I wish she could see me now. Because I would just love to see the smile on her face, knowing that I'm making food that she inspired me to make.
Yep. Almost like the pride in herself through you.
Yes. Yeah. And I just remember at her funeral, everyone talking about her legacy. And I'm like, holy crap, that's me.
Yes.
Like, wow.
Yes.
So yeah, that's where Delicious Memories come from, is I remember my grandmother's sweet potato pie. I remember my grandmother's fried okra. I remember those things. And actually, just this last Thanksgiving, I literally felt like she was in the kitchen with me when I made the sweet potato pie. I was like, Grandma's here right now. Because I tasted it and I was like, holy crap, that's Lily Askew.
You can just feel her.
Yes.
You know, when you were talking about legacy, there's a clip that I know, or not a clip, but like a time that I know that Oprah's referenced many, many times, and that when she was building her school in Africa and she was talking to Maya Angelou and she was saying, this is my legacy. Mm-hmm. This is it. And Maya said, you have no idea what your legacy will be.
Yeah.
Because it's in every life that you touch.
It is.
Every life that you touch. And she speaks to that enough that what I love is her consistency. It's like she says the same things over enough, and then eventually it clicks with me and I'm like, oh, maybe, okay, maybe that's true. But right. Like you're creating, apart from everything that you're doing, you're creating memories or sparking conversations, or whether you're either inspiring people to look at something in a new way, or you're just reminding them of something precious from their history. Mm-hmm. That's beautiful.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's what food does.
Yeah.
It's what food does.
Well, after talking with you and Candace, I feel like I have like a whole new love for food.
That's awesome.
Yeah. I mean, I've always loved food, but like this has just re-sparked a passion. Yeah. Like I want to go home and cook now.
Yes.
Yes. Job well done.
Thank you.
So before we wrap up our conversation, I do want to ask you about your don't cut your own bangs moment. It's how I like to end every don't cut your own bangs episode. And just to clarify, it doesn't have to literally be a bang or hair cut or style gone wrong. It can, but just something in your life where you went all in and then it kind of flipped on its head, but you learned something.
That's a really good question.
It doesn't necessarily have to be because like it's funny is I've had several people comment over the course of these episodes, like, well, I cut my own bangs and I do a really good job. So maybe it's something you went all in. And you're like, oh, damn, I'm good at this. Like, I have not had success cutting my own bangs. And I assumed incorrectly that many people have, but some people have great experiences with it. So maybe you went all in, but it's more about like, what did you learn from that thing?
Okay. I'm going to take it back to MasterChef because during the filming process, I was sequestered away from my friends and family. I had no access to technology. I got to talk to my mom like for 5 minutes once a week. That was a time where I had to let go of control completely. And I know I have control issues. And I was like, okay, I'm giving it up. I'm surrendering. And during that process, the only thing you know every day is what you're wearing and what time to get up. And that's because someone tells you. Other than that, everything is a surprise. What you see when we lift the mystery box, we don't know what's under. We're all trying to figure it out and conspire, but we literally don't know. And so during that time, I just felt so liberated and so free. One, from not having to deal with my cell phone. Two, from letting go and not trying to control. Also, from a creativity standpoint, that was when I realized that I don't have to be Miss Corporate America 9 to 5, because when I was a kid, I used to play Office. Like I just knew in my head that I was supposed to be this corporate person. And I learned that that's not me. Isn't that crazy? Like, people want to play hide and seek. And I'm like, can we go in the house and play Office so I have my files and my papers? It's ridiculous.
God, if they'd had the Container Store when you were a child, can you imagine?
Yes. Best thing ever. And so I learned to let go. I really, truly did go all in. And I can name the few times where I got in my own head and it affected how well I did. But all of the other times I was like, okay, we're just doing this. And then coming back here after filming that, like even my mom, I could tell sometimes I have conversations with my mom and she's like, who is this child of mine? Because I have freedom in expressing who I am, and how I look at things has changed, and self-employment has done that. All of those things are rooted to the start of my MasterChef journey and saying, okay, I surrender, I'm all in. And so it is just like, even how I wear my hair now is like, I am more liberated to do that as compared to what I would have done prior to MasterChef. And not because of MasterChef, but just because I learned to truly be who I am. There's one particular episode where I won a mystery box challenge, and I was so floored that I won because it was a Latin box, and I'm considered like American comfort food Southern chef. And I'm like, how did I win this box? And the judges were like, you put yourself on the plate.
Oh.
And I was like, oh, you saw me. You saw me in my food and what I do. And I say all the time, if you really truly want to know who I am, have a seat at my table. Like, that is when I am the most expressive. It is when I'm the most vulnerable. It's when I'm really showing you who I am. And that's all because of MasterChef, that now I have confidence and security in doing all those things and being who I am, and talking about uncomfortable things and not being concerned if other people are uncomfortable about it, because it's still important regardless. And yeah, it all started there. That's when I cut my bangs.
Yeah. As you were talking, I hadn't thought about this in the longest time. When I was 20, I was the lead in a play that was a tool used in a like digital theater history textbook. And so the entire process of creating the script, the first read through, the first performance, then they converted the play to a film, and through every stage that was all recorded. So I was very aware that I was going to be on. And I remember you saying that you felt like you had the guard up and that you were very serious. And that is definitely my default. When I feel insecure, small, or uncertain, I get serious because what I want is to be taken seriously.
Right.
I want you to take me seriously, and I want you to know that I'm serious about this. And then, but how it read was, well, just looking back, seeing what I saw now, I can see how much I was trying to be taken seriously instead of like, oh my God, I could have been just having such a good time.
Yeah.
But I think, and here's the funny thing is that throughout this entire preparation process, everything, the second performance of the show, I forgot my next line and picked it up, skipping 7 pages of dialogue. That was all caught on film. Wow. And so every person's backstage reaction to, what the fuck is she doing?
Yeah.
Oh my God. That was all caught on film. Now, my professor, who was co-authoring the book, loved it. What a great learning opportunity to show people what happens in theater, mistakes. So he thought this was this incredible learning opportunity, but it was like, I felt like it was at my expense.
Yeah.
And it was awful. Everyone's reactions and pissed off at me was all there. And I remember I wore that. I martyred that for a long time, long time. But I think that the lesson that was in that experience that I didn't see at the time, but it seems to have represented itself to me over and over and over again, is don't take it all so seriously.
Yeah.
Just let yourself enjoy this moment.
Yes.
Just let yourself enjoy this moment. Because I know that like when I make mistakes, when I'm in that space, it's less precious. If I have a sauce on my face or if I have food in my teeth, if I'm not trying to be precious and I'm not making the moment precious, that moment's just not a big deal.
Yeah.
It's just not. But I've had to learn and relearn and learn and relearn that experience many times. And so I love that you got it. And you've carried it forward.
I have. And trust me, it's not an everyday thing, but anytime I think about my MasterChef experience, I go back to how like free and liberated you were during that time. You weren't sitting behind a desk. You weren't tied to your device. You were doing the thing that you love the most. And how did that make you feel? And so I try to think about that often. Fortunately, people bring it up all the time. And so I get to think about it often and I love it.
Yeah.
People are always like, you're so sick of talking about MasterChef. Nope. I'll talk about it all day long.
The highlight. It's a highlight, man.
Now I'm out of contract. I can tell you whatever I want. They don't own me anymore.
Well, that's wonderful. So I guess if nothing else that you got from this episode, anyone who's listening, just like reach out to her and ask her about secrets from MasterChef. Because I guess now she can tell you.
Tell you how dreamy Gordon Ramsey is.
Oh, is he?
Girl. Those blue eyes, like he's in your face and he's yelling at you and you're like, you just keep yelling so I can stare at them ocean eyes.
Then what happened, Gordon?
Right? Tell me more. And honestly though, sometimes when he's yelling at you, you're thinking, oh my gosh, you're a genius. Why didn't I think of that?
Yeah.
So I learned a lot from him, but he smells great. He hugged me 3 times.
Not that I was counting, but there's definitely 3. And then a side hug, so 3.5.
I love it. Yes, exactly. Exactly.
Tanorria, thank you so much for your time today and for sharing your story and your insight with us. And I look forward to sharing a meal with you and continuing challenging myself to ask uncomfortable questions and push myself further. And I hope anyone who's listening is encouraged to do the same.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much for listening to this episode of Don't Cut Your Own Bangs. I hope that you enjoyed listening because I thoroughly enjoyed making it. For any follow-up information, wanting to connect with any of the links that Tanorria mentioned in this episode, I will make sure to include those in the show notes. So check those out. Make sure to follow Tanorria, check in with her work, sign up for her newsletter. You're going to want to stick with all of her content. And if you would be so kind, please rate, review, and subscribe to this podcast.